I'm Pete Urey. I'm the president of Friends of Binney Park. And I just am very pleased to be here to introduce the evening. It's a three-part program tonight. On the first part, I hope we keep it short. I want to tell you we have a marvelous group. This is our second annual meeting. Yay! Our second, okay? I'm here to tell you that the Friends of Binney Park has over 300 members. We don't charge them anything. We ask them to sign up.
Not yet.
And there's a person who knows. We've been very fortunate to be able to spend the year building our awareness in the community. And we've done that through being involved in events like Art in the Park in June. We were at the model sailboat race. We stood out here freezing one night. Where's Helen Delago? Raise your hand, Helen. Just want people to see who you are. That young lady over there joined us. Linda was with us, and it got so cold. Linda looked across the street from CVS and said, "Is that a liquor store across the street?" That's Linda over there.
By the way.
So, anyway, we've had a lot of fun doing that, but we need your help. Not looking around this room at the distinguished people who are in this room, and you aren't busy enough, but by golly, if you know somebody who can donate an hour or two to help us during this coming year, that will help us grow as well. I can tell you that we have projects planned. I've talked to Greg Kramer, raise your hand, who identified people who are here. And I'll be dropping names as we go through here. That's the easiest way of doing it. So I talked to Greg, and we're hoping that we can accomplish some things, one of which has been lingering for 10 years, and that is the completion of the Stone Dust Loop Trail in the south end of Binney Park. That was in the master plan going back to 2015. We hope to do some forest planting up on the hillside annex. That's where the daffodils are in the spring. And we'd like to add some woodland plants to complement that, if we can do it. Over in Binney Kitchell, we have a couple of objectives. Greg has plans for adding some trees in that area, and we're all for it, and we'll help him if we can. We also have a wetlands issue, and Beth Evans, who's sitting back here, raise your hand, Beth, okay? You don't have to tell everybody, but, you know, we've got to address the wetlands entry there. It's, you've got to work. We should either buy rubber boots and leave them at the entryway or something like that. Anyway, so those are the kinds of things that we spend the money that we get. And we do seek donations, and we have donations, and we welcome donations. There's a cash box over there, and Linda's got the door locked. You notice that? So now you can't get out. Anyway, we have $10,000 in the bank. How do we get there? We got there by standing out here on the Sound Beach Avenue and selling turtles. I want you to know, folks, we are the largest marketer of toy stuffed turtles in Old Greenwich. Anyway, that's one way we did it. He isn't here today, but Marcos Torno, I'll raise my hand for Marcos, who owns Images across the street, has been an extraordinary resource to help us. He lends his store to us so we can have our monthly board meetings. He got us involved with Art in the Park and Art in the Parking Lot. He recruited 27 local artists to paint birdhouses, which allowed us one September Sunday afternoon, in 2 hours to have those auctioned off, a silent auction, and we raised $1,000. If you haven't been in a store that's framing and paintings and stuff like that, do it and just thank him. He is a wonderful resource in this community. And he was involved in the installation of the clock across the street. I got to know him well when we did the bed race one year over at Arcadia. Who remembers the bed race? All right, yeah. Bed race was fun, except we damn near killed somebody. And we decided it would be wise not to repeat that. Anyway, all right, so moving on. I've told you about where we want to go, what we want to do, our mission. We are supporting the Parks Department staff. We want to be people who come up with ideas. We want to be able to volunteer when there's a need for volunteers and an opportunity to volunteer. We want to keep Binney Park kind of the way it is because we have been told through the master plan and through comments from people they like Binney Park the way it is. And that raises the word protection, which is going to be a theme of our third segment of this evening, in which we're going to be talking about the complexity and opportunities, the challenges that those people who are here this evening and on our panel will tell you it ain't easy to get and add protections to parks. So, having said all that, I'm going to transition to ask Cynthia Ellinger to come up. Who's Cynthia? Cynthia is one of our 16 board members. And just to give you an idea of the caliber of people we have on the board, Cynthia, I've gotten to know reasonably well. If you don't know her and you like birding, she is the lady who conducts those Sunday morning, first of the month birding sessions out at Greenwich Point. If you saw anybody in your neighborhood with a pair of binoculars around Christmas time looking in your windows, no, those were the Audubon winter bird count people. And Cynthia was the coordinator for all that activity. And she's staying on the board, but she is very likely to be the president of the Connecticut Ornithological Society Association next year. I think we should share, I'm going to turn this over to her as our nominee.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of our nominating committee, which included myself, Robert Sibley, who's over there, Janet Stone McGuigan, right in front, and Bill Rutherford in the back over here. I would first like to thank and acknowledge the service of 3 members of our board who are retiring as directors on the Friends of Binney Park board, and please stand when I call your name. Madeline DeVries, she here? Yes, she represented the interests of Riverside Garden Club, and she will continue to help with some projects. Anne Marie Hesser, who will continue as an advisor. I don't know if she's here. But she made the brownies. And Kaneko McLennan, who's the outgoing vice president and current director of Greenwich Green and Clean. And I know Kaneko's here somewhere. Thank you all. The nominating committee also thanks all those who have served on the Friends of Binney Park Board of Directors and have agreed to continue as directors. So please call when I call your name, just so we can see who's on the board. Nancy Chapin, former secretary, I'm not sure she's here. Pam Bruno, co-secretary over here. Diana Klingner is over here. Tad Larrabee, retiring treasurer. Joanne O'Hara over here. Joan Seguin, our co-secretary. Robert Sibley again. Paula Simon, over here. Marcos Torno, we know is not here. And Peter Urey, who's our retiring president. Okay, we also thank the current directors whom we propose as incoming officers for 2025. John Friedman, treasurer, I'm not sure if he's here. Linda Bruno, vice president, over there. And the position of president is not yet finalized. In addition, we appreciate the support of our community advisors and will add 2 new advisory members. Kate Chikevich, over here, and Jonathan Fassone, where's, I thought I saw Jonathan, over here. They are going to join our advisors Susie Baker, Britta Kalkos, Helen Delago, Dr. Greg Kramer, Jen Luddington, Janet Stone McGuigan, Bob Meany, and Bill Rutherford. Finally, we nominate the following new directors, Friends of Binney Park, for the class of 2025. Joseph Carrar, in the stand, a travel specialist and founder of the Friends of Binney Park Facebook page. Chrissy Grimp, is she here?
Yes, here I am.
Oh, okay, thank you. I remember Garden Club is interested in our pollinator garden ideas. And Franco Gorman, is he here? With management skills in horticultural services and a former member of the Binney Park Master Plan Advisory Committee. So the slate of nominees has been available to the membership at least 30 days before the annual meeting. New directors shall be elected by a simple majority of those attending the annual meeting. Nominations may also be made from the floor at the annual meetings. Are there any nominations? Okay, hearing none, we'll continue with the vote. All in favor of accepting the new slate of nominees as directors and officers of the Friends of Binney Park as presented, signify by raising your hand. Okay. I think we have, are there any, I don't know what else we need. It looked like we have more than enough to pass this. Okay, thank you very much. And congratulations to all of you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Okay, there's part 1. Part 2. We're fortunate to have Dr. Greg Kramer with us this evening, and he is going to talk about, I think, a fascinating project. He is doing a digitized tree inventory of the trees in Greenwich. Hope I said that right. Greg is our supervisor of parks and trees and our tree warden. He works for Joe Siciliano, who's sitting back over here. And by the way, I should also introduce John Fassoni, who replaced Aaron Wigglesworth and is our field operations manager, senior vice president. What else? Okay. All right. That's it. And we have a youngster visiting. That's great. I got to know Greg 3 weeks after he arrived on the job in 2019. Greg was raised in the New York area, but he chose to take warmer climes and got much of his education down in Florida. He got his doctorate from the University of Florida, I believe in plant medicine. Maybe you'll explain that to us one day, what it is. He worked in Florida at places like the Block Tower. He worked for the New York Parks Department. And then he came to us in the spring of 2019. It happened that was the time that our director of parks had managed to get a good sum of money for the improvement of Binney Park. And Joe gets credit for spearheading that. Thank you very much. Because it allowed us to put together and really dust off what was becoming a little bit of a tarnished gem, and that's Binney Park. So what happened after that, Greg was giving huge amounts of input. He was new to the job. He was learning from a group of us who were involved with Binney and have been for a long time. And he started pulling all these things together. but I think we hopefully gave him an introduction into what was going on in Greenwich. And at the same time, we learned from him. So, without giving too much more information, I'm going to let him take the stage now and show us a presentation about what he's doing. And we need somebody to turn off the lights on that side. Okay, that's good. We're going to try and do this without a microphone. If it's a problem, then let us know.
Thank you, Peter. Want to take that?
Thank you, Peter. It's a great introduction. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Hope you're ready for a journey through the world of 3D trees. So yes, as Peter said, when I first came on as Superintendent of Parks and Trees and Tree Warden, my first thought was, well, I'm a tree warden and my responsibilities are trees throughout town. I need to know at least who they are and where they are and better understand, the collection of trees that we're working with here in town. So we started to go around and see if we can find a company that would be able to collect all the information and be able to use that information, because trees are an asset, and they are one of the few assets that get more important as they get older. So they don't appreciate. So young trees, as they get older, are more valuable. So I really wanted to understand, what we have here in the collection. So fast forward, we were able to find a company. We put out an RFP, found a really great company that gave us really what we were looking for, Davey Resource Group, which is a subsidiary of Davey Tree. Been fantastic to work with. We really kind of got together and brainstormed and said, how do we want to tackle this project? So, well, let's see what we can do every year and make it into a 5-year project. So first year, we would concentrate on the southwestern side of town and kind of work our way to the northeast. And, within the budget, see what we can do. So we're at the 5th year, we're at the goalpost, and I'm really excited. Looking forward to having this put onto the park's website so that the public can go and browse around and see what trees they have on their property or where trees of interest might be. But from our perspective, aside from being able to go through, sorry, I'm gonna have to sit down and kind of work the computer, but collecting the information where trees are, where trees could be, where they were once, what condition they're in, diversity, how you can go in and put in a queue and ask for oak trees or sizes of trees. So it's a valuable piece of information, and also gives the value of the trees. So if we wanted to, during a construction project, say on a particular road, let's just pick one, say North Street, they're requesting taking down 5 or 6 trees. We can go and have a monetary value of what the cost of those trees removed would be, or what they're contributing to right now in terms of carbon sequestering and water storm management and other ecological benefits. So that's some of the numbers you see here. So it's a great tool. It's a fun tool in a lot of ways, but it's a great tool because everything is there in terms of the information you would need. So I'm going to sit here and kind of go through it, and I certainly welcome questions anybody may have. Again, this is a living document, and we have to keep it as current as possible. So when we lose trees, we have to go in and make those edits. Or if we plant trees, we have to go in and make those edits. So there's some catching up that needs to be done. We've planted 500 and some odd trees this past year. I think 548. Is that close? So all that information needs to go into this database. So we don't have that information in there right now. So those 500 and some odd trees are recorded. They're not unrecorded somewhere. We have them in a database, an Excel spreadsheet, but we need to insert that information in here. So again, it's a great tool, but it's only as good as the time we put into it. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this coming year, getting it up to speed. We're still working with Data Resource Group. They're going to continue from the initiation, so we're going to start from the beginning and kind of work our way through again. So they'll help update the data in the program. But also, I'd like to, if we could, kind of take this into 2 directions at the same time. That being starting to accession trees in our parks, because the trees, I should note, the trees that you see here on our land right-of-ways are not in the parks, unless there's a tree on the park right-of-way. So there's a few parks, and I think Binney is a good example of that, where we could go through and have each one of those trees, the data collected on them and show up on the map. Some of the parks, of course, they're too large, and there's too much woodland to do all that information, but some of the other parks, such as Bruce Park and Binney Park, I think are good examples of data we can collect and show here on the map. So I'm going to just sit down here and kind of show everybody how it works, and again, any questions along the way, please feel free. So I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. Oh, sorry, make this a little bigger. So yeah, as you can see all the different data points, and just out of curiosity, the three colors represent three different items. The green represents a tree, the blue represents a vacant space, and the brown represents a stump. So when I log in, you'll see I can go into the system and type in show all stumps, and this map then would show all the stumps with no other trees, no other distractions of data points. It would just show stumps. Or I can do that with oak species, I can do that with maple species. I can put in anything and say, show me all the trees in this hexagon area. I can go in and create a hexagon, and it'll show all the trees in that hexagon as well, or just a straight line down a street. And then not only that, when I log in, you can also look through Google Maps. So it'll give you a street view and an overview of the tree you're looking at. So let me just pick one out, just arbitrarily, so you can kind of see. Sorry, it takes a while sometimes to catch up. So let me just pick this right here. See, it says vacant, maple, red maple, maple tulip tree. And it gives you, the information says vacant small site. So we know that that would have to be a small ornamental tree, not a big shade tree.
I have a question.
Yes?
Who designates that that is a vacant space? You?
The question is, who designates that as a vacant space? When they go out, they being Davie Resource Group, they go out with GPS coordinates, and they go and they review the area, and they say, here's a spot in front of house A, there's a possibility for a tree to go there, and they hit a data point, and they create the spot.
Okay.
Some of these spots already exist in terms of the town flyover, so when you go on the town website, you'll see green dots, but there's no designation to those dots, they just represent trees. There's no designation in terms of what species and size and all that information. Sorry if I have my back to the side here. So I'm going to log in right here and just show some more information.
Pay attention, everybody.
The changes password into this. Can't see it.
I have a question while you're logging in, Dr.
Yes.
So this is just the right-of-way trees,
Yes, currently this is just the right-of-way trees.
and then do you plan to expand that? And why did you start with right-of-way as opposed to others? Just curiously.
That's a good question. Why did I decide to collect data on right-of-way? Because that's where we're really trying to create the most tree canopy. Our parks, although we can always use more trees, have a fair amount of trees in them. And a lot of the right-of-ways, I noticed when we drive around, you'd see numerous areas where trees could go, and stumps already exist. And also, there's the risk, this is also part of our risk program. So the risk of trees that we don't know the conditions, so I want to understand their health conditions, so that we can mitigate any problems that they may have. And understand a little bit more of our diversity that we have here in town in terms of, tree species and sizes.
And
Yes?
will this record changes through time as, you know, trees don't make it or are removed or?
Yes, it doesn't do it automatic, it'd have to be input, but yes, so one green dot that you saw on the map may disappear once we insert the data that this tree was removed. But the tree information is not lost, so it's important to always keep the data. So the data is never lost, just the location of the tree is denoted as not existing, but there'll always be a record of a tree having existed there, what it was and the size of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Yes?
So, on my lawn, part of it is town property. Are you considering that? Is that part of this data?
If the tree was on the line of town and private,
I just have like, 20
Yes.
feet on my property that belongs to the town.
Yes.
Would they say space, space, space?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, probably for small trees.
Right, maybe you
Yep.
could define right away, because everyone may not know.
Yeah.
what that means.
Yeah, right away is public property. It's not park property, but it's town property that is public. It's, could be next to a sidewalk, could be next to the road, it could be very narrow. There's no real size throughout town in terms of how much right of way there is, so it varies very much. I know there's a lot of, discussion, sometimes people saying, well, it's standard, 20 feet or 25 feet, but it could be as much as 50 feet or it could be as little as 2 feet. But yeah, that's the right of way. So, let's see here, just go to, okay, so I logged in. Just some quick things here. Let's see, go to tree inventory. So if this does load, it would show, the species and the size of those trees, so the almost 39,000 that we have. See right here, address.
So you can tell me where the biggest pin is?
I can do that, absolutely. Yep. Let me do this page. And go here. So go to search. And here. So we were talking earlier about, finding specific locations for vacant lots, vacant spaces for trees. So if I click on that, the map will pop up, and this shows all of vacant spaces.
I have a question about the vacant spaces in
Yes.
general. So because of the changing weather patterns, what are you predominantly is there like a particular group of 2 or 3 types of trees that you're planting more than, I know you're not putting in new maples anymore, or are you still planting maples or?
Yeah, so the question is, with the climate change, what are we planting or looking more to plant, is that correct?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what trees are you hoping to plant?
Well, we're still planting maples, but I will say we're diversifying a lot of our oak species. I think we're up to 14 different species of oaks that we're planting in town now. I was able to find a vendor that had 2 additional species that we're going to be planting this summer.
Which species?
Laurel oak and Sherman oak. Yeah, yep.
Is that because those are more for warmer climates?
Yeah, they are. Laurel oak particularly is a more southeastern tree, but Sherman oak does go up into the Great Lake region and then kind of swings a bit to the east, but it's not very common in New England. But yes, we are picking tree species that are more adapted to a warmer climate. But just real quick, if you look at the map now, see how I highlighted all the vacant spots? So the hope is, when I'm able to focus a bit more on the program, and we're going to have some staff helping us do this, is to go to these locations on the map. I'll just make it larger so you can actually see. It does give addresses. It just has to see if we can see addresses here. Sorry, it's just kind of slow. So we could look at the map and create work orders for these different addresses to plant trees. So someone can go through this whole system and just queue out an area, like I said, take a line and create a square or a hexagon, and go through and pull the addresses that have, this is the GIS, and be able to create all different work orders based upon locations that need trees. And the same for stumps. We can create work orders and go through the various areas and grind stumps in different roads in a strategic way.
I have a question.
Yes, bro.
In terms of stumps, is there an environmental impact, positive or negative, to grinding rather than leaving them to rot?
I mean, leaving stumps is perfectly fine. It does contribute to the natural recycling of the wood.
Right.
But we're removing stumps based upon creating more space for new trees.
Right.
We wouldn't be doing that in the woods, and we certainly let nature take its course. But it could take 20 years for a stump to rot before a new tree could go in. So we're just moving the process along a little quicker. Let me see. I just wanted to see if there were some other things I wanted to highlight. Again, from our side, we can create work orders. There's a work order creating capabilities. We have a work order system now, so we may not necessarily use this to create work orders, but you can. It's got, again, it's one of those tools. It's really fantastic, and it's great. You just have to really use all the capabilities that it has. So here it has a different trees you can pick from. I'll just go through it real quick. You may not be able to see it. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry. But it has ash, aspen. We don't have avocado here, but it has avocado on the list in case you have one in your backyard. Please let me know too. I'm interested in seeing it. Both cypress, bamboo, which is not a tree, but it's on the list. They include a lot of other trees that would have, been indigenous to more of the south. But sassafras, sequoia, of course, would be the west coast. And then you just take this list and put it in the site, and if there were sequoias and they were recorded, those plot points would show up on the map. So I don't know, is there any questions specific to the program? I know it's kind of a lot of information, and it's not
I have a question.
Yes,
Is your strategy for the tree planting following like zonal changes, like what it would be more like a zone 7 now as opposed to being a 6.5 or a 6, because the whole weather's shifting. It seems like we're more closer to a zone 7 now than we were
Yes.
in the past. Does that sort of guide the species selection going forward?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So does the climate change and the zonal change. Yes, it definitely determines some of the selection. And if anybody was so interested in seeing some cool, funky conifers, we've been planting a lot of cool stuff at the Pinetum. So if you want to see some interesting zonal change, it's certainly evident at the Pinetum. And that's keeping true to Colonel Montgomery and his vision of horticultural interests and cool plants. So I'm not suggesting we plant monkey puzzle trees around town everywhere, but we can grow them now, which in Colonel Montgomery's day would not be the case. So definitely things have gotten warmer.
We probably have time for one more question. Everybody has one?
Yes, sir.
They are like, what's our oldest tree? You know?
It's our oldest tree. Is it the cottonwood at Audubon?
Probably.
It might be the cottonwood at
Oh, I know
Audubon.
that one.
Yeah. I
Or
think,
it's a private tree.
yeah.
Okay.
There's
How
a
old is that one?
1756
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
They figure it was planted when the house was built.
Yes,
So,
So,
okay.
but there's a Charter Oak in Old Greenwich on Charter Oak Lane that is 365
Wow.
years old.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And can it live there? Is it happy there?
As happy as a 365-year-old tree can be. The owners are taking quite nice care of it,
Okay,
but
okay.
it's probably near the end of its
Not
life. I
threatening.
think.
that's great.
Not threatened.
No, no.
Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you. So, please look on the website, because we're going to hopefully have this on soon, and you'll be able to see it on the park's website. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to have the seventh inning stretch. Everybody can get up. We're going to make a transition to a panel. Get rid of the screen. There are lots of very good sandwiches over here, which were donated by, again, Marcos Torno, going around to Alpin Pantry and the Bagel Shop and Garden Catering. And so help yourselves, please, and refuel, and then we'll get our panel conversation going shortly. And I see Fred Camilla's walked in the door, and that's wonderful. And Ryan Fazio and Steve Mesker and Hector Arzeno were here, but had other meetings they had to participate in. So unfortunately they've left, so I can't show them to you, and you can applaud their presence. But anyway, there we are. So let's take a break.
Okay, this is part 3, and part 3 is a panel conversation on the protections, the challenge, opportunities, complexity of protecting our open space and parklands. How do we come to bring that topic here this evening? Well, it came about because those of us at the Friends of Binney Park started getting questions from people who had seen what had happened down in Bruce Park. What happened in Bruce Park is a utility put in a sort of out of character, I'm going to use that phrase, pedestrian bridge. And a lot of people were unhappy with that. And they thought in Bruce, which is I think our oldest park, is that correct, Joe? Bruce is our oldest park. That it could have been done differently. All right, so they said, well, you've got protection for Bruce. Why doesn't Binney have protection? And we didn't have an answer. And I don't think we really still have an answer, which is why we're all sitting here tonight. Because I hope what will happen in this panel conversation is there'll be an education to help us all understand just how complicated it is to do these things. Now, having said that, talking specifically about Binney, which is 90 years old, there are protections in Binney, and they go back a long, long way. And if any of you know the reading room is that little pocket park on the opposite side of the Perot Library where the traffic circle is. That little park was purchased by Mrs. Binney and another gentleman, I forgot his name, in the 1930s to prevent it from becoming a gas station. And why is that important? Because I want you to just, as I am talking, I want you to visualize how joyful it is to be able to drive down Sound Beach Avenue and you come to the Perot Library and you have the Perot, you have the Park, you have the church, you have the cemetery, and you have Binney. And what a great entry into the village. And the village is the village. There's no other village in Greenwich. It's special because of its character. So, fast forward. Here we are in 20, I'm sorry, into 2009. And the Parks Department commissioned Martha Lyon, a noted national historic landscape architect out of Massachusetts, to do an historic report on Binney Park. Then budget money came along in 2015 to do a master plan in Binney Park. These are foundation blocks. They allow the Parks Department to say, look, there's historic characteristics in Binney. Look, these are the things that were in Binney which we should use as building blocks if we're going to maintain and keep Binney. And then I had to be working with the Old Greenwich Association at the time, and we did a study. It didn't get a lot of recognition, but we were able to go to the Parks Department and say people wanted to keep Binney as it was. They liked to walk in the north end of the park and enjoy it as a passive park area. So these things added up. And we came down to 2019. I've already mentioned that we had that $150,000 in order to improve the park. That was good. And then there were residents, Candace Garway, Rita Baker, who managed to get a protective loop around the park on the roadway through planning and zoning, so that's a different source. By the way, planning and zoning wanted to be here tonight. They're not here tonight because they have their own meeting, which was switched over a different day because of Martin Luther King Day. So we have that, Ring Road. We have an overlay of protection that was recently given to the village out the street here. The First Congregational Church was given a historic designation by the Historic Society. So there are protections in place, but it's piecemeal and it's complicated. And we're hoping that what we get tonight is a little bit of sense of how you all work together, what the general goals are, and where we go from there. And I will leave it with that.
So thank you, Pete. I'm Janet Stone McWigan. I am thrilled and honored to be tonight's...
I could have introduced you.
That's okay. I also, Janet Stone McWigan, I also serve on the Board of Selectmen when I'm not an advisor to the Friends of Binney Park. I'm just going to say that the McWigan family has loved Binney Park for decades, but I'm going to end my remarks there because, as you can see, we have a great panel assembled before you. We have a lot of good questions that I think that once we have this discussion, I think we're all going to leave with a better sense of how we protect our parks and what more we can do into the future. But I promise we're going to adjourn by 8:30, so I'm just going to get right to the questions. But as Pete mentioned, Patrick LaRoe, our town planner, was not able to join us, but we did give him all of the questions that we're going to pose to tonight's panelists, and he very kindly sent his responses in advance. So I am going to do my best Patrick impersonation tonight. But I will start with an icebreaker question so that all of our panelists can introduce themselves to you. And that is, please let us get to know you a little better. Could you share with us your connection to Greenwich's parks and the role your department, board, or commission plays in their management? And Patrick's response is, planning and zoning is two parts of the local control towns have through the state to direct development in their community. Planning, quote unquote, is the long-range goal setting done mostly through the town's plan of conservation and development, their subdivision regulations, and their ability to enact their own zoning regulations. Zoning, quote unquote, dictates how land in town is used. As it relates to parks, P&Z is the reviewer of proposed development, or typically redevelopment, of town property. All right, and then we're going to go on to Andrew Melillo. Thank you, Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Melillo. I'm Secretary to the Historic District Commission, native of town and grew up here in Old Greenwich and running around Binney Park. Played a huge role in my upbringing, so I have a fond attachment to the park. The Commission's main role, as you recently saw with Bruce Park, is there are potentially, depending on meeting the criteria, possibilities to put by state statute protections on parks if they merit it, which would then allow the Historic District Commission to review any municipal improvements or other such activity that would affect its purview, such as structures, which could be fences, walls, bridges, buildings, and the like. So that's how the Historic District Commission would potentially interact with Binney and its resources. But I love the park. I was baptized at the First Church. My parents were married there. My grandparents are buried across the street. It's a central landmark and a very fun place. I was eating cookies there the other day.
I'm Beth Evans. I'm Director of Environmental Affairs, and Environmental Affairs includes both the Conservation Commission as well as the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. And probably those are fairly obvious connections to the park and the resources that are in the park. I've been in this position for 2 years, and one of my first experiences was actually reviewing a Boy Scout project, creating a pedestrian bridge in the park that we then had to work with Parks and Rec to move to another location. But I have had the pleasure of walking around Binney Park, looking at both the wetland resources and the upland resources, trees, and other parts of the park.
Good evening. Before I speak, I'd like to thank Greg Kramer for his presentation and being part of our organization. His background and experience is invaluable to not only the department but to the town. So Greg, thank you for what you do and working this program. I know it's been a lot of work over a few years, but hopefully it'll yield some really great results for the residents and also keep us apprised of our inventory of trees. So thank you for working that program. I'm Joe Siciliano, the Director of Parks and Recreation. I grew up in Greenwich. I currently don't live here, but I spend 6 days a week here. I don't call it a job anymore. I call it a lifestyle because I'm here all the time, involved in many things. As a Director of Parks and Recreation, I went and just simply looked at my office today. The responsibilities that the department has under the direction of the First Selectman. We have a Board of Parks and Recreation that's very chartered responsibilities. It's all written down in the town charter what the roles and responsibilities are. There's a section for the director and for the Division of Parks and Trees and the Superintendent of Parks and Trees. So when we talked about protection and our roles and responsibilities, a lot of the language comes right into the charter of the town of Greenwich of what we are responsible for, and it translates into our job descriptions and how we operate our business every single day. So it's all available to read online if you're interested, and it does create an opportunity to see how we manage the parks and a lot of our facilities, and also the role of our responsibilities to the assets and the residents. So if you're interested, you can go to the town charter under section 75, and it gives you a bunch of descriptions about all these roles and responsibilities.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Jim Michael. I'm the Commissioner of Public Works. I've been the Commissioner for 3 weeks now. But before that, I was the Deputy Commissioner, so I'm not completely new to the organization. Been working for Greenwich for about 14 years now. So Public Works, it manages all the roadways, it manages all the buildings that fall within any parks. We manage all the bridges, sidewalks, all that fun stuff that especially this group has experienced over the last several years, the last 5 years. We've been pretty active with this replacement of the Sound Beach Bridge and the Westcombwood Road Bridge. So one of the things that we do and we try to do with all of our projects is to keep in mind the where it's located, the nature of the area, and try to reestablish that look and feel of the area. So we really try hard, and hopefully you would agree that with the 2 new bridges that when we built them, they did incorporate many of the features that were there to bring the stonework and so forth that we have as part of these projects into character with the area. So that, you know, for Parks and Rec, or for the parks themselves, our department really provides a lot of the engineering expertise that the different departments and groups that are working there do request of us. We're kind of advisory to them, so we work very closely with Greg and Joe and company on various things and help them. You know, we've also been working with keeping the Binney Park dredging. We did that back a number of years ago, and we had what we call our maintenance dredging done this past, about a year and a half ago, something like that. So we're trying to keep up with that. We have to do that every couple of years. So these are pieces of how Public Works is involved in the parks.
So, thank you so much. So we'll go on to our next question. As a rule, it seems most residents have expectations relating to town assets. Roads should not have potholes. The beach at Greenwich Point should be clear of debris during the summer months. Marsh and wetland areas should not be filled in. Old stone walls might best be considered part of our heritage and preserved, and significantly sized trees should be treated with respect and perhaps preserved, especially on private property. When it comes to parks, what strategies do you follow to be attentive to these kinds of things? If funding were not an issue, what would you do? And I will again pretend to be Patrick and say, I think the town has and continues to have passive recreation, paths, trails, beaches, which are great assets. Where I think we should be looking towards is continued expansion of universal accessibility. The one thing that is for certain is that if we all live long enough, we will encounter some form of mobility issue. Making sure there is access for persons with mobility issues in all parks should be our continued goal.
So for this question, the Historic District Commission plays a more limited role in the overall question, except when it comes to maybe stone walls or the gazebo in the park. If funding was not an issue, the commissioners of the Historic District Commission have fine taste in aesthetics and what they'd like to see. And stone construction is very expensive, stone walls as well. So it all comes down to making sure that structures don't look like a Pizza Hut or something out of place in the existing framework or landscape or streetscape from the public way. HDC has a purview to look at anything relative to it from a public way, which could be a street, could be a parking lot, could be a waterway. So anything that the public can see into it is in their jurisdiction to review. And their main job is to make sure that what's there now and the legacy it holds is maintained throughout.
So as I mentioned before, you know, we look at whenever we're doing improvement projects, what's the nature of the area, we try to improve them. It keeps the character of the area. As was referred to before, Binney does have a scenic, what's considered a scenic loop. It's Sound Beach Avenue from the Arch Street intersection around to Westcombe Wood, across Westcombe Wood, and then back up Arch Street. So in that area, that's a protected loop. So any improvements that we do as Public Works, we have to go through planning and zoning in order to gain approval for any improvements for that, to make sure that it meets the intent of that area. We continue, you know, as we move forward with any projects that come up, we try to work with the neighborhood groups and so forth to maintain the nature of the area. So,
as being the Parks and Recreation Department, we get stuck with all of it in the sense that we have to look at the active recreation, the passive recreation, the conservation, the ecological values of various assets in the parks. And we also get the fine task of divvying up pieces of the pie so that people can enjoy what they set out to is some of their leisure time and recreation time. So it's a big task, and there's a lot of moving components all the time to this question. Patrick LaRoe outlined one, and so as we go through some of this, and I might interject a couple times here, we just completed, or it's in the last review draft form, a whole ADA accessibility review of all the major parks in Greenwich. And it looks at not only the pathways, the roadways, it also looks at the building accessibility and the internal part of the buildings that may need altering to accept different folks with different needs. That report is still a little bit in draft. By the end of next month, it'll be in final form. I would suggest there is a section on Binney Park if you're interested. I would suggest, I would recommend that you take a look at it. And there's also, as part of that plan, some recommendation on how to improve on what we currently have or make those various adjustments so that we can then become more of a user-friendly, accessible location for people with all needs to come and appreciate. So in doing this, I sat in my office this afternoon and looked at a bunch of these, just 5 minutes I pulled out a bunch of reports. There's an ADA study, there's a historic landscape plan that Peter mentioned, there's a coastal resilient plan that Beth could talk reams about that addresses Binney Park and flooding, etc. There's also the Binney Park Master Plan, which we've worked on and is a work in progress, I consider. And there's also information from DBW on the pond, the dredging, and all of that. One of the things I'm gonna suggest, and I hope folks latch on to it, Peter mentioned people who could be active and help out. This is a different way of helping out. I think going back and kind of reworking the master plan a little bit and including some of these documents that are so important now that maybe weren't available at that time, to create what I'm going to call is a guiding vision of what Binney Park should really be. So you can use the word master plan, you can label it for whatever you want, but I think having all of these reports, sections, and information, whether it's the history, whether it's the mapping, et cetera, is very important to create that vision, the guiding vision of what Binney Park is, what it was, and what we might want to see it in the future. And it also helps create kind of an approach where people want to come and just say, well, maybe we can just plop this in the middle of Binney Park. So, it also creates the kind of an atmosphere where people might think twice about, well, Binney Park, this is the history, this is where we are, and this is where we might want to be in the future. And it might just kind of ward some of that stuff over. People have the great ideas of this will look great in Binney Park, but it's really so much out of the character. And so what we try to do is create this guiding vision of what Binney Park or all of our parks might really want to be. We just did a comprehensive study of Pomerantz and Tuckman property. The company did a great job. They cataloged a lot of things, and they also provided some recommendations for now and into the future. And I would suggest that if we're going to work on this project to create this guiding vision, that we might consider Binney in the future for a formal master plan done by an outside agency. I mean, we're all great people here. We have a lot of knowledge, but they really hit a home run with the last Pomerantz-Tuckman report. And if you get a chance to look at it, you should, because it's a great document maybe to transfer into other park locations. So, thank you.
And then bringing up the rear. One of our tasks as the Conservation Commission is to try to help educate the general public into what the natural world is doing, how we're reacting to it, how we can adapt to it, how we can mitigate some of the things that are happening, what it means to have 8 inches of rain in 6 hours. And I see the parks, especially Binney Park, as a perfect example of a great place to educate people. After the storms that came through in the summer, my phone kept ringing. Do you know where the water level got to? Do you know what happened? And my answer was, yes, I do, and now you do, and now we need other people to understand too. So Joe and Jim do the heavy lifting with planning, infrastructure, and park use. And we're gonna try to help people use the parks to understand that we're part of the environment, we can't control the environment. So that was my short answer.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, the 10-year plan of conservation and development represents a broad-based document on how our town might look in the future. When it comes to our parks, should there be, or is there, something more you'd like to work with? In other words, what other protections are available for you to use? And again, I will respond on behalf of Patrick. If you review the town's 2022 open space plan, you can see the list of protected open spaces. Protection means a mark on the title that limits the use to parks and/or open space uses. This is the strongest tool in protecting land, both public and private, from future development. For the most part, the parkland in the town has water or is water adjacent, which then applies a large number of environmental and zoning regulations to promote environmentally sensitive development. Town-owned property has the benefit of a multifaceted government oversight, which generally leads to a good plan for land assets, as it takes collaborative approach to reach consensus.
The biggest protection I'll talk about that the Historic District Commission could help facilitate would be what you saw on Bruce Park with the local historic property designation for Chapter 97A in the state statutes. And that's a lengthy process, and you have to meet certain state criteria about its historical resources and its history and why it's a historical resource for the town and would merit this particular protection. It would go through 2 readings with the Board of Selectmen. It would go up to the State Historic Preservation Council. It would come back to the HGC with a letter from the state. It would then go to Planning and Zoning, and if it gets that far, it has a public hearing, and after that, the RTM to get a final vote to put the designation on it with an ordinance change. It took Bruce Park from conception to that reality, in realistic terms, 5 to 7 years. The study report was exhaustive. It took many years and months back and forth with town officials and department heads to get their support, but also to get approval from all the different reviews. So it's a very complicated, lengthy process, but it's not impossible. Binney Park does have a unique history. It's just with the purview of the Historic District Commission. You have the bridges and the gazebo and a few other assets that could very well qualify with its unique history, but it's something that would be discovered along the way as you're attempting to get the LHP, whether you're going in positively in that direction or not. So that would be the main protection on the historic side that you could apply to Binney Park potentially.
I'm going to start this time. Binney Park is, as many of you know, designated as a floodplain, a flood zone. And most people don't live in or near a flood zone. That's not necessarily true in Greenwich. A lot of you live in or near a flood zone. You just might not want to. But Binney Park, in my opinion, is a perfect example of a flood zone that's active and that people don't get hurt when it floods. They get amazed, they get upset and alarmed, but they don't get hurt. And I think we can use the park and its function as a floodplain, its regulated ability to take on floodwaters from lots of different sources, store them, and release them slowly, to help people understand that flooding is something that happens whether we want it to or not. And we need to understand it so that we can protect ourselves better.
In reading the 2022 Plan of Conservation and Development Open Space Plan, they both refer to creating planning. And I think what you're hearing tonight is there's different levels of planning. But I think Binney had a good start with the internal master plan that the Friends group did. But again, I'm going to keep pushing this because I think it's time to expand that plan and add these different components that I've talked about and others have talked about this evening. And to create more of a comprehensive plan and get a true look at the asset that we have, the asset that we need to manage, the asset that we need to think about for the future. Just to look at that coastal resilience plan that was put together that Beth was inherited and manages. It's quite comprehensive and it's quite scary when you start looking at intervals of 25 years or more to see what could happen to Binney Park if it happens, and some of the projections about flooding, continuous flooding, it creates lack of use of some of the property. It could create problems for some of the assets there. And it's really something I think that we could incorporate and look at how we could maybe short-term mitigate some of those situations and also protect some of the assets in the park that we really enjoy and love, and how and so I think I'm going to keep pushing this theme about taking the next step in that Binney Park Master Plan. It was a great project, and we had a lot of exchange for a lot of hours, and a lot of positive things came out of it, and some direction came out of it. So some of the things that you're seeing being done in the park currently or in the past few years, we were able to get some funding for it, which we have, we're asking right now as a result of the Pomerantz-Tuckman plan. We're asking the BET to fund some of the initiatives in that plan, which is good because we have a document to wave in front of them and say, hey, we did the planning based on the plan of conservation told us to do plans for parks. Now we'd like for you to fund some of it, and we're also been able to attract some outside funding. People that want to say, hey, I'll take on this community project, a community group outside of the Friends group to take on a community project to improve the asset. So I think this is all very positive, and I think Patrick is pretty much right on target here when he talks about, the planning, the preservation of parks, open spaces, and have a strong, front to protect that. So I think, maybe after this meeting tonight, we can have a secondary conversation about the other components that we should add to the current document that we have. So.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than the fact that one of the things that we wrestle with the most in Public Works is we have federal, state, and local regulations that we have to follow relating to traffic, especially when it comes to roadways. So that sometimes can come in conflict with some of the desires to keep things the way they've always been. And so that is something that we really try to wrestle with. We feel we did a really nice job with the recent bridges. We did, taking into the FEMA regulations, when we build a new bridge, if it's in a major traffic area, which Sound Beach Avenue is, we needed to bring that bridge out of the flood elevation. So the actual surface of the bridge itself is at above the flood elevation. So knock on wood, we won't have a case where that bridge itself will go underwater. Some of the area around it is still down low, but the bridge itself was built a little bit higher. And I think that there was a lot of concern about that early on during the design process. I hope that people feel that we did a nice job, and it does kind of blend in with the area. It doesn't stand out as being way up in the air like there might have been some initial concerns on. So.
Thank you. All right, the next question. What do you consider the most positive things you can say about our parks looking at the future? What do you think are your biggest complexities to future management of the park system? And again, I will start with Patrick's response. I think a positive of the pandemic is that people found our parks. It feels like people continue to use and find our open spaces, both large and small, to get outside and recreate. I think the increase in use helps to shed light on the areas of attention, whether that is maintenance or future planning efforts.
This one's a little limited for the Historic District Commission to answer, but I would say that the most positive thing about these parks, especially with Binney and Bruce Park, is that these were created by community-minded people for the very purpose of recreation and people in the town to come together and use. And I know I've benefited personally from it tremendously, so I'm very grateful to Binney and to Bruce and all of those who had come before and had that vision. So they had created this vision in a historical sense, and now it's your responsibility as custodians of the town to carry that out and move it forward and to make sure the next generation has that opportunity. So just from the historicity point of view, this is a legacy that you've all inherited and we've all had, and we need to remember that.
I think for me, one of the things that I notice about this is the overall community support for parks. There's a lot of people in this community that have a lot of investment emotionally and just in their time that they put forth towards these parks. Look at the number of people that are here tonight, the number of people that volunteer for just this group. There's many other groups that Joe and Beth and I all work with or talk to on a regular basis related to supporting these things. And it's without all that community support that there wouldn't be the resources the way they are. There's also a significant amount of financial resources that are invested in our parks through the town. I know, Joe and I are always asking for more money for things and not always getting it, but this community does support its parks and facilities that way.
Being the director for 25 years and being part of Parks and Recreation organization for 45 years, we won't go there, but the interesting part is that when COVID came about, our parks were being loved to death in the sense that we saw record attendance at some of these parks that we had never seen before. And a lot of people who never experienced some of the parks that we have, and we have many nice locations with different assets and different, that people were now experiencing our park system when they just, maybe on a minimal basis used them before. Well, interesting enough, now we're outside of the COVID crisis, people are still using those parks at record numbers. They fell in love with some of the locations and some of the assets those parks has to offer to them as a resident. And so what we're really seeing is an increase or a revitalization of the use of the park system, where we didn't see that. We was kind of stagnant before COVID. And we're also seeing the increase, as folks talked about here tonight, the increased use comes with more wear and tear, comes with more maintenance, it comes with more need to look at different ways of maintaining those parks and keeping them in the best shape that we can. So we try to get a little creative, and groups like yours or Friends of Greenwich Point or the Friends of Byron Park, and they're all kind of blossoming here. Friends of Pomerantz and Tuckman are all vitally important to our organization because you create a support system and you can support us with some of the work that you do, you can support us financially, and you can also support our case when we ask for funding to do some of the things that we need to do in some of our parks to keep them the way we like. We are lucky folks to have the park system that we have and the diversity of parks that we have in Greenwich. You can go from Byron Park, that's kind of a multi-purpose park, to Binney, to backcountry, to some of the open space, and they all have very keen characteristics, and I think that's what makes Greenwich a real attractive place to be in.
And as the newcomer, I haven't been here quite as long as Joe, but I am impressed by the volunteers in this community. The number of people who are willing to come out, spend their time, spend their energy, and make things happen. Again, I watched the pollinator pathway. Volunteers really transform some of the areas of town parks into beautiful teaching gardens that are well-maintained and well serving the educational component. I know there's talk about getting a pollinator garden going in Binney, and we're going to support that. We're going to work with Parks and Greg and try to make that happen as well, so that everyone can see what we're talking about in practice.
Thank you. All right. How are you addressing issues like the sea level rise? Binney Park, among other places in town, is in a floodplain with a future possibility of extensive long-term saltwater incursions. What is being done to address this kind of threat going forward? And again, I'll do my Patrick imitation. On private property, we have federal, state, and local laws that help to guide development to be resilient. With sea level rise, it's an issue for low-lying town infrastructure as to what happens when the tides are frequently reaching above their current elevations. Does the town continue to repair in place? Does it redesign, or do we retreat? Believe it or not, parks and flood-prone areas can be opportunities for a double purpose: recreation and capacity for storm events. The closest example is Mill River Park in Stamford, where they actually removed dams to allow brackish waters and reestablish the coastal habitat. Infrastructure and plants in the park are designed for this and the occasional flooding which can occur. Another is in Meriden. Meriden Green is a park designed to hold water and then returns to park post the storm event. In coastal areas, we have to expect saltwater incursion. Binney Park is protected by a weir at its south end that limits the tidal waters from reaching the park. The short answer is we can design with it and not lose the park.
I won't spend too much time on this one, as the HDC doesn't really have the means to address sea level rise. But I will say, from a historical standpoint, as I've read almost nearly every land deed on record, in the middle of where Benjamin Street is, that was called the Great Sawpit Swamp. It was called the Great Swamp. It was a swamp. Binney Park was originally, the Azamuk Creek was originally called by the English settlers Long Meadow Brook, and these were salt marsh fields. The ocean came in, or the sound came in. They knew this. They used that to get sedge and other things for their farming, day-to-day life. Old Greenwich, besides what is now Binney Lane and Ford Lane and those places, which they called the Ridge, is a little bit of a high point. It's all swamp. It's low level. And I work for a civil engineering firm, and I can just say that on rainy days we get a lot of calls from Old Greenwich. So just the historical use of the land, from looking at the land records, and just the nature of the land, it's wet.
Again, that's just part of education, working together to make sure that people understand this isn't happening to any one of us, it's happening to all of us. We need to figure out how we're going to adapt to it.
It's an interesting topic. Again, you know, just being here for a long period of time in my career, you can see the frequent storms. The Binney Park has now become, you know, holding basin for the two tributaries that run into it, and also the backwash that you get from Long Island Sound. 25 years ago, when I first started this as director, it wasn't as frequent. Now it seems to be more frequent, and I predict that we're looking at some of the data that's been provided, that it's going to continue to be more frequent and more challenging to maintain the park. To look at, you know, the plantings and such that we put into the park, some of the other assets there, and to maintain them if we're going to continue to have you know, this rise in sea level, and not only from sea level, but also from some of the other development that's going on along the tributaries that come into Binney Park. You know, some of the things we can control and some that we can't. I mean, years prior, there's a lot less asphalt up on the Lands Rock side. So when they built a huge shopping center up there, when, you know, Stanford House Wrecking was there, they had more ground that would you know, take in the water versus runoff, the directed runoff, things of that nature. All of this plays a big role in how the park operates, especially during storm and tide conditions. So Again, the report that Beth has, that was done, is a real eye-opener, and we need to think about that a lot, so.
Yeah, in DPW, we're continuing to look a lot at sea level rise. The state put in some regulations a few years ago about what they call 20 by 2050, meaning 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. So we have to take into consideration that when we design things. And just think about 20 inches, that's more than 1.5 feet. And that's 25 years from now. So it's something we're working with, it's something we do. We are looking to put a study to start taking into account various locations across town on the public works side to address sea level rise in the next year or so's budget. We're going to be asking for some initial design funding for that. And then the other piece I would say is, like I mentioned earlier, the Sound Beach Avenue Bridge is another way that we took into account that when we did the design on the project and construction there. So, thanks.
So thank you. So we have packed a lot into this panel discussion. We are now hitting 8:30. I'll just ask, does anyone have any parting thoughts before we close?
Nope.
Nope.
No, I think this is a great exchange. I think this is a great opportunity, a great exchange to be all together and, you know, to work towards a common goal of, you know, keeping Binney Park in the way we like to see it and like to use it. And I think I want to thank everyone for their effort and the volunteerism that, you know, helps us and helps our department and the Parks Department especially accomplish our goal.
Yeah, that's really all I was going to say too. Was just, you know, we're just very glad for the continued support of the, you know, of the public and any of the public improvement projects that we're looking to do. Because without the support, we won't get the funding, which we won't be able to do projects. And so that's, you know, that doesn't come just by us sitting in front of the BET or the RTM asking for money. It comes from the constituents of the town helping to support us in that manner. So thank you.
And our doors are always open, so please come, ask questions, bring concerns.
So thank you for your time.
And thank you all for your interest in Binney Park and in our parks in general. I mean, it's marvelous to see this crowd on a cold night. Thank you for all being here. So thank you so much. Thank you, panel. Thank you, everybody who was here. It's wonderful.